I've carried soil from the very first house that I've lived at all the way till now. I'll tell you why here in a moment, but I'm catching up with some late fall potting up. So what do we got here? We've got willows. By the way, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. We've got willows that have been soaking and now have roots on them. And so we're potting them up so that we're gonna have willow trees. These particular willows are suitable for baskets. And I don't know if I posted the video already, but there's a video where we're salvaging these from some plants that had to get moved. Another thing that we're potting up is this aquatic grass. Now, you'll notice we're potting up stuff that's wet. Aquatic grass, willows, things that like wet feet. And we're doing that with soil that has been created and made over the years. So all the way from living in Maryland to Virginia to where we are here now, some of this soil has carried. Now, you have to be extremely careful doing this because if it's not biologically active, healthy soil, you can bring neotodes and different types of biology that's not helpful to the environment. So let's just go over this real quick. So aquatic areas, Jeff Lawton talks about this, ponds, shallow areas that get a lot of soil and a lot of leaf breakdown. That's some of the healthiest soil possible. And the reason why is because it's converting biomass into a soil medium that has a high level of carbon in it. So because it was digested by the microbes underwater without oxygen, that slime or slurry is going to be a great fertilizer. Not because it was digested without oxygen, but because it becomes a great feed for the aerobic bacteria and soil enzymes and stuff like that. And so what ends up happening is if we put these buckets in here and you're growing aquatic plants, what's left over becomes this thick, wet, crumbly type of soil like this. Now you'll notice in this soil, there are charcoal. So there's biochar in here. There's little pieces of biochar. There's little bits of grass and leaves and stuff like that. And we sift it out. Now these are in pots. So this is from my nursery. So I've got a large nursery going together. And this is plants from pots. But we're using it to inoculate new material so that we can then pot up the willows themselves. Now, the willows have been out in the open and deer have been chewing on them, ducks have been chewing on them. So we're gonna put them around little cages. But this has got a basin on the bottom so that when it rains or we pour water in there, it will bottom soak the plants. So now why am I potting these things up? Why am I trying to nursery plants all the time? Well, in my region, there's actually Virginia native plant swap meets, exchanges. So every one of these plants here represents either a willow tree on the property, in a hedge, in a wet area, along a trail, for coppice, for basket making, for weaving, or it represents a trade. I can trade it for another plant that I want. And that's why we pot everything up. Plus, we're saving money on plants by potting things up. It takes a little bit of effort, but for example, these grasses can be divided. So I can divide these grasses out. Now, why am I potting up and propagating plants that like wet feet? Plants that can handle wet areas. Well, let me show you. So that we have the ducks going on over here, and the chickens are going in to salvage what the ducks don't eat. And this chicken looks like, this is a rooster. But what we can see here is that the ducks, they manure and make wet everything they touch. So what we've done in here is we've actually put some willow stems in there that didn't have leaves on them. And then over here, I buried some willows that had roots but no leaves so that we can grow up some willow in here to soak up that surplus water, to soak up that surplus nutrient, but also to provide fine, small leaves for the ducks to eat. Now, every time we have the duck water get soiled, we've got to dump it out somewhere. So the best way to take that duck water and turn it into something valuable is through the roots of grasses, through the roots of aquatic plants. So right now, while this is clear water, this particular bundle of plants is going to bottom soak up that water and grow out and give me biomass. So it's going to convert duck water, duck waste, this deep bedding. It's going to convert it into biomass that can go back into the system. Now, the great thing about this particular grass here is that it's got a high silica level, so the ducks don't eat it. But I can take a pair of scissors and I can just trim it right across the top, and then take that material and just throw it in the bedding, and basically makes new bedding. And then the cycle continues. So remember, the best soil is that soil that has been saturated and is constantly processing nutrients. And through constantly processing nutrients, it's creating the very best of soil. It's creating a biologically active soil. And because there's no oxygen, it creates a biologically active soil that is feed for an aerobic composting process. So speaking of compost, if we go down slope a little bit, because remember, we're going to have graywater on this site. We're going to have duck water on this site. And if we go down further, we have our shower area. So if we wash up, that water goes down into these basins. And then below these basins, we have another large basin that's coming together. There's our composting area. Can turn our compost. And right here is some surplus soil that we just mounted across the bottom that'll get compacted when it's a little bit wetter out. It'll get compacted into a dam, and then this area will be dug out as a basin. So if we're running gray water from upslope past the ducks into a basin, we're going to want to have as many plants: banana, kangkong, taro, lotus, aquatic grasses and reeds, cattail. We're going to want to have all that stuff growing in here. Now, we're under the trees, so we're not going to have a lot of sun to get things growing, but we will have the habitat to raise it. And so this area, if it's cut out like the basins we have on the lower hill, we can get these plants growing in it. Now, again, the banana and the ducks will eat the kangkong, but the ducks can come over here and manure this area as well. So it'll be saturated with a very shallow basin. That basin will be full of aquatic plants that can grow here between these two corrals. And then the surplus biomass can be cut off and used as bedding in our animal system. See, the bedding is very important because the bedding now gets manured, adding of nutrients, and then that manured material gets compounded or impounded through maybe composting. So this is all the leaves and stuff that is coming out of the sift here. And then all that gets put back in a compost pile. So it's either going to be the compost pile behind me, which is bulk materials, or this here is our kitchen compost. See, our kitchen compost and scraps. Now, again, we're doing this. You might say, why would I want my compost in the middle of a living space? Well, I might want that compost in the middle of the living space because we're going to call the ducks in here, and the ducks will eat the flies. Plus, it also helps us know if we need to put more biomass. So we're going to use biomass in the form of sawdust, chopped greens and materials, and possibly, if I can find a manual silage machine, in the form of silage. So we're going to grow grasses and make silage for the animals, but also some of that silage can go in as part of our composting system. Now, we don't have our human waste here. We don't have our human manure system here mixed with the soil because, that, again, like I said in the beginning, I'm transporting soil from site to site, place to place. I'm making soil here, composting and blending according to the materials that we need. Like, that's a very loamy soil right down there. I managed to get some neighbors' mums they were throwing away, and that had a lot of peat in it, and so we mixed that in. We're sifting and sorting and mixing everything. So you might have some questions about, what about mixing stuff? Well, we have to be aware of that. So you want to mix what you got. So here's my potting mix. The potting mix has got a combination of all kinds of stuff. Perlite, straw sometimes, straw dust, and eggshell. You can see an eggshell there. And again, I like it to be slightly moist when I'm potting up plants. But what we end up doing is I pour the pots out here, and then I sift it out. I sift it all the way down. The big chunks of stuff that didn't compost or that was in a pot and didn't process. Oh, there's a worm right there. That's going to go over into that bucket, and we keep the cycle going. So what are we doing here? Well, we're maximizing our nutrient retention in our nursery system, but at this point, we're also inoculating beneficial soil microbes, beneficial soil bacteria and enzymes and all the stuff that's in soil. Because when these plants go out onto the property, they're going to have a nice little root ball on them. That root ball is going to contain a sample of the things that we've cultivated here. Now, there's worm castings in here. There's, see how chunky that is? It's almost like a soil brownie. And that's because, again, the soil is biologically active. There's some charcoal that works like a little hotel for the microbes and things in the soil. And now I don't crush the charcoal necessarily. If I find a chunk like that and it doesn't go through the little hardware cloth down here, I'm just going to throw it back in the composting system. So again, we're mindfully sifting, sorting, combining, and making our potting soil for the plants that we're planting out. And we're mindful of the fact that if I sell someone a plant and that soil contains a neotobe, it could contaminate their property as well. So again, we're being very careful. Like I said, I carried soil across state lines from state to state, and I had to be sure that I was not passing anything along. So there's nursery guidelines. So we operate everything here like we would a backyard nursery or a commercial nursery. But you can see this is actually full of mycelium. That's got a lot of mycelium in it, but it's not rotted down enough to be in here. So it goes over here. This might be, there you go, there's a little worm. Is that a little tiny worm? Now, in a commercial nursery, not a permaculture nursery, not a holistic regenerative land nursery, and there are things that, like that's plastic, they would sterilize the soil. None of the soil has ever been sterilized. And yes, I do have to pick out plastics. This is probably from a tarp somewhere, or some of the paper that might have been composted years and years ago. And so there's a little bit different system. If you want to learn how to do a backyard nursery, and you want to basically have thousands and thousands of plants for free, and even take plants that maybe have been damaged and recover them and make more, or hundreds and hundreds of new plants. If you want to grow your own soil, we have a program on composting. Then you're in the right place. Ask your questions in the comments below. Visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org. And we also have some online course material. But again, we'll be happy to answer your individual questions. We get you on a newsletter. We might write articles about the things that you have questions about. But again, this soil is, when I send it away for testing from time to time, it comes back perfectly balanced. It comes back with all the nutrients it needs, but it is simply mimicking nature and building through aquatic systems, building through hot composting piles, building through a management where essentially even the plants that don't grow go back into the system. We use cover crops. We're going to use, in this case, I'm going to get some native soils from the forest here and inoculate for the stuff that we want to grow in these woods here. But again, we're not, it's not dirt. It's not just compost. It is biologically active soil designed to grow our plants the fastest it can grow the plants with the maximum nutrient intake. It's full of minerals. We supplement with minerals, and we do it all in a very systematic approach so that it doesn't take extra time. It doesn't take extra effort. And in fact, it's providing for the animals. It's managing waste and organic materials. It's maintaining a healthy environment. We'll talk about the graywater system another time, but the graywater system is designed to minimize the amount of mosquitoes that might exist. And we're also composting our organic waste, so there's very little trash that comes off of this property. We're even going as far as mulching the bottom of our nursery beds with old cardboard. If you want to do this and more to get your homestead up and running at 12 months or less, at break even or better, visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. There are nuances that we're not going into detail on the videos because it takes so much time to understand. But again, you can get it in a class, you can get it in a program, and I'm seeing ducks eat something, so we're going to stop now. www.prosperityhomestead.org.